Module 1 today. I was going to continue some of it tomorrow and then review 2, 3, and 4 Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Sounds like a plan. We're a little bit early yet, so we'll hang out till we get 7 o'clock. There are, in this module, there's a couple of the lecture things that have conditions that go along with adolescence. And I thought next week that we would do those first because there were several chapters that just had to do with adolescent development, but those chapters didn't have anything to do with conditions that you find with adolescents. So in your lecture in this module, there are 2 really great references that talk about, you can click on them, and it talks about all of the things that you find during the adolescent period. And I thought next week we might start with going over some of them and kind of tidying up this module. There's some things yet to do with this one. And then I think the next module, respiratory. So we might do a little bit of respiratory next week and then finish it the week after that.
Okay.
So what are you taking for courses?
For this semester, I'm only taking pediatrics. I'm part-time because I'm still working too. My husband told me I had to keep working.
Well, okay. Mine too. I started a psychiatric nurse practitioner program that leads to the DNP with it, but I was really thinking very ambitiously when I first started them, because you could either go part-time or full-time, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go full-time on the very front, when we first met, and then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you're crazy if you do that. So I went part-time, and part-time ended up being full-time for me, so I'm so glad that I didn't go full-time, because there's so much work with it that I don't know how I would have kept my sanity. So I have been very thankful that I've gone part-time and not full-time, because they require a lot of stuff. So I was very happy that I hadn't committed suicide. Going full-time.
Yeah, it's been a lot more work part-time than what I figured it would be, honestly.
Yeah. If you really want to delve into it and learn it, you can probably get through it going any program full-time, but I don't know how much you really are able to grasp, going at quick pace. So I didn't want to do that. So about 5 of the 20 of us went full-time and got, further along. But they were only 1 semester ahead of me. And I thought, my sanity's worth 1 semester.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I made that decision, for sure. I think it's smart if you're working full-time, not to try to go full-time to school too. And have, I'm sure, like you do, a family and a husband and maybe children. My child's 23 and getting ready to move into an apartment. So she's fairly fully grown, but still needs to be from time to time. I think you always need a mother, no matter how old you are.
Yeah, I'm missing mine. Mine's on vacation right now, and I'm missing her.
They're a great resource to have, even if when you were growing up you never listened to anything they said.
They get real smart, you know, somewhere around there when you're 20. They start.
Yeah, they do. They get smarter, don't they?
Yeah.
The older you get, the smarter they get. Seems like. Yeah. They say that happens at 25 and 26. That they finally realize that you might have a little sense. But it sure doesn't happen about what we're talking about today during adolescence. That's not one of their developmental tasks. Who the parents have any sense at all?
No.
Mostly today it's going to be developmental and no disease. Next week we'll do some of the diseases with this area. There's some people do peds with age and disease together, and I noticed that the one that set this course up last year, she did it by system. So I'm trying to figure out, it would be really good if you could do it both ways, because that way you remember when you see an adolescent what usually occurs during that period of time. But there's many diseases that are across the whole span of pediatrics and not really just particularly in that area. So I'm trying to think if I get to teach this again, if I will do it by age. Some of this is age, or I would do it by system, and or try to figure out how to do it, map it out and do it both ways. So I'm trying to think about how that would work. We're almost ready to start. Hi, Dana.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you both for joining me. We may pick up somebody else along the way, but if not, they can always look at the recording. So that's the good news. Hi, Chris and Christina. Nice to have you with us. Before we get started, are there any questions about the
News is news. It's all the same. But it's not. There's a big difference between local broadcast news and cable news. Local stations are part of my community, connecting you to local news.
Do you have any questions about this test? Those
And
of you who joined us.
is there going to be a time limit on it? Is it going to be like an hour? Or?
You will have enough time to do your
Okay.
test because there will probably be scenarios that you'll have to read through. So there'll be plenty of time. I'm not interested that you can get through the test in a certain period of time.
Okay.
That's not the objective here.
Yeah.
The objective is that you're able to read and figure out what's going on with the patient and then try to figure out what you want to do about it.
Okay.
So no, you will have plenty of time. It won't be that you have to rush through. I don't really want that for you at this stage of the game.
I'd rather not either.
Yeah, tests are bad enough, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's get all upset when I get ready to take them. We have to take them where I'm going to school. We have to take them under surveillance, and I never had done that before. And so you have to have your voice, and you have to look at the screen and make sure, in the middle of the test they ask you to look around the room with your. So it's a little nerve-wracking. I'm finally sort of getting used to it. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We're at the 7:01 hour. So today we're going to talk about 3 sections of your assignment, and mostly dealing with developmental management of adolescents. And if you join me late, next week we will talk about the conditions that are found in your lecture for this module that deal with adolescents. We will cover those next week. and begin the respiratory. So one of the most common questions adolescents ask is, am I normal? So I tried to be normal once, got me seriously confused with myself. So identity versus role confusion is one of their challenges during this time. And I had a female patient one time that came in, and she swore that she had a tumor on her side. Well, we finally figured out it was one of her ribs. Another little boy called that my husband knew, called me up, and he had a pimple on his genitalia, and he was totally convinced that he had a sexually transmitted disease, but he hadn't had sex. So that would have been a little difficult to have acquired. So they come up with all these things during adolescence. So adolescent development, puberty is the part of the process that begins with the biological changes and leads to the ability to be having a baby or fertile. Adolescence is the transition, the psychosocial and emotional transition from childhood to adulthood. And pre-pubertal is sexual maturation rating 1, SMR, if you ever read that, to adulthood, which is rating 5. And these divisions are termed, as you probably know them better, the Tanner stages. And the female stages of the breast development, somewhere around the ages of 9 and 10 years of age, breast budding, or CHELARCHE, occurs between 9 and 10. The breast buds usually begin about 6 months before the pubic hair appears. And African American girls tend to start all of this about 6 months before Caucasian girls. The timing of the onset of breast development has nothing to do with the breast size at the end of puberty. Most girls are worried about the breast size. Most girls have asymmetric breasts at the start of all of this, but eventually they become more or less the same size. Stage 1, I think your book gives a clear picture of this than the slide does, are the prepubescent adolescent stage. Only the tip of the nipple is raised during the stage. Stage 2 is when the buds begin to appear and things are a little bit more raised during this time. Stage 3, they're slightly larger and you begin to see glandular tissue being present. And stage 4, the areola and the nipple become raised and form a little secondary mound above the rest of the breast. And then stage 5, it becomes more rounded and adult-like, and the nipples raised. Linear growth in girls and boys. Girls' linear growth begins shortly after the onset of breast budding and reaches peak 1 year later. Most girls reach peak height 6 to 12 months before the start of their menstrual period, which is around 11 and 12 years of age. We do know that probably due to things like hormone ingestion from our foods are responsible for an earlier onset of menarche, maybe 9 and 10 years of age. It wouldn't be unusual to see girls with that starting much, much earlier now. Boys, linear growth begins around mid-puberty, late puberty. They lag about 2 years behind girls, but you'll find that boys can continue to grow after the teenage years. So here's a side view of breast development. You can see that stage 4 has a little mound in the nipple there, and then in stage 5 it looks like a mature breast. Female genitalia development. Tanner 1 is in the pre-adolescent phase where there's really nothing going on. Tanner 2, you have scarcely pigmented straight hair along the medial aspect of the labia. So you're beginning to see some pubic hair in stage 2. Stage 3, it gets darker and coarser and curlier. Stage 4, it's abundant, but not to the lateral sides, not spreading to the medial sides. And then there is a stage 6 where there's further extension laterally, and it's more dispersed. And a lot of women, not a lot, about 10% of the women have actually stage 6 pubic hair. So the male, the initial sign of male puberty is the enlargement of the testicles. And this occurs about 6 months before you ever begin to see pubic hair. In Tanner stage 1, like for the girls, there's nothing going on. Everything's staying the same size. In stage 2, just like the girls, you have minimal pigmented hair at the base of the penis. In stage 3, coarse, dark, curly hair that's spread over the pubis, and the penis begins on stage 3 to increase in length and width. And you might, in stage 3, get a little gynecomastia, which eventually, ultimately goes away. And in stage 3, the voice breaks and muscle mass increases. This is always around 13 years of age. Stage 4, the hair actually spreads to the thigh, the penis increases, and you get underarm hair in stage 4, acne, and your voice changes. And this is usually in boys around 14 years of age. And then in stage 5, pubic hair spreads to the thighs. The penis is mature at about 16 and a half years of age. And you've got the facial hair and the physique of the male. So those are the stages that you have to, when you examine these children, I'm sure you already have had to grade their Tanner stage. And as you do more and more of that, you get better and better at it. So some of their psychosocial, emotional, and cognitive development, remember we're talking about adolescents, that they need to feel a sense of belonging in a valued group. And I can remember growing up years ago that one of the things that really made me feel part of the group was we had a Rook Club. And I was a member of the Rook Club. We had a card game going every Saturday. And I really felt, special because I was part of the Rook Club. They acquire skills and master tasks that are important to the valued group. And this could be the beginning of majorette, cheerleading, football, baseball, basketball, any of those things. They develop, hopefully, a sense of self-worth, which is extremely important to keep them out of trouble. They develop at least one reliable relationship with another individual. And I can remember I had a best girlfriend who lived on a farm and they milked cows. And I thought that was all very interesting, nothing I'd ever wanted to do, but it was interesting to me. But she has remained my friend throughout my whole life. So I think sometimes those very early relationships, they can last. And then they ought to be able to demonstrate cognitive potential in that their whole thought process are beginning to form during this time. The adolescent brain growth. Well, the one part of the brain that isn't really developing very early is the prefrontal cortex, and that really is responsible for what are known as your executive functions. Children, for example, with ADHD, we know that they have trouble with this area as well. It's related to the abstract thinking part, reasoning, judgment, self-discipline, ethical behavior, personality, and behavior modification and emotions. So it's really regulating you from a very executive, administrative way. This brain part is vulnerable to toxic stress, abuse, maltreatment, mental illness, also social interaction, and chronic illness. So what they found, even in utero with children, is that stress from the mother or stress on the child actually permanently reconfigures your brain. And so it's very hard to overcome that because little neural circuits that should have formed don't. And so you're going to be able to tolerate stress less well and may not have the resiliency that you need to be able to get through the difficult periods in your life. So this stress on the adolescent during this time that this prefrontal cortex is developing can cause them to be chronically mentally ill or engage in risky behaviors or not be satisfied with interpersonal relationships. So it does have some pretty serious consequences, and we know that drugs do cause changes in the brain structure as well and can be responsible for some problems as well during this period when the brain is still forming, not the most important part, but a critical part to their being able to function. Drug use during adolescence, drugs become the only thing that leads to pleasurable feelings, and then therefore you have a craving for the drug etched into the brain. So that's why it's so important that adolescents don't do drugs, because their brain gets kind of grooves in it, and then they want the drug, whatever drug or drugs that they've been using. In fact, even binge drinking, which some adolescents do on the weekend, can lead to loss of memory and cognitive function. And then you see on the slide the other things that binge drinking can do for you. So it's really a serious thing for adolescents to do drugs because their brains aren't done. And because of that, they're going to cause some permanent damage to their brains. Some principles of behavior change during this time is that the transition is continually going on and generally smooth. Now, you might not think that if you've ever lived or had an adolescence. It seems like they go forward 2 steps and backward 1. But really, it's a continual, smooth transition. And then during this time, some relationships change. The mundane, everyday issues become a source of conflict, with the adolescent arguing to the point of excess. They pick fights with their parents. And this is just part of, just like when they were toddlers, saying no to their parents. This is part of their emancipation from you, is for them to do this kind of activity. And what you have to think about is, what is it that I really want to respond to? What's your serious safety issues, and what are little things? Does it matter that they've got pink hair today? Hair grows out, eye washes out. It's not going to be an everlasting event. So maybe the pink hair is not as bad as them drinking and driving. Cognitive changes, they should develop during this time formal operational thinking, where they begin to think about values, good and evil. They're aware when you don't give them congruent arguments. They understand their place in the construct of time. What will I be doing in the future? Children learn about time when they're about 7. They learn about death and dying about age 7 because they can understand time during this time. Tips for parents. If you're a parent of an adolescent, or you're planning to be eventually a parent of adolescents, here are some good tips for you. to try to get you and them through. I'll give you a chance to read those. I know some important ones for us were to know your children's friends, because whatever their friends are doing, they're probably doing too if they don't admit it. So if they're having sex, their friends, well, guess what? Your own child may be having sex too, because it's, they want to be a member of a group. You want to involve them in family activities, even though they might walk 3 feet ahead of you and, think that everything you do is stupid, you don't know anything. You still want to get them connected with the family and continue to supervise them despite the fact that they claim that they really don't need any supervision. They're perfectly able to handle themselves. Early versus late maturing boys. Boys with adult physiques are generally given more leadership roles, more proficient in sports, perceived to be more attractive and smarter than their peers, and are more popular. Late maturing boys who stay childlike until 15 years of age are more likely to be insecure, suggestible, vulnerable to peer pressure, and subject to bullying. So it's kind of hard on boys that are late maturers, and sometimes you'll see them be so short, and then after they graduate high school, they are so tall. But it didn't happen at the time that they really needed it to happen, so that they wouldn't be made fun of. Adolescents, if you've ever been around them, they're very egocentric still. They have an imaginary audience. Everyone's thinking about them. So if they have a pimple on their forehead, of course everybody's looking at it. They have what's called personal fable, that they are special, and that's a good thing because it provides them with a sense of importance, purpose, and hope, and helps them to imagine the possibilities in their life. It can have a negative effect. There's no way I can ever get pregnant. They do overthinking. They make things more complicated than they are. So if their boyfriend ignores that they've done something nice with their hair, then they'll break up with them because they think that, he doesn't like them. There's apparent hypocrisy in their thoughts. Rules apply differently to them than to others. They can get in their parents' stores, but not in theirs. I think one of my favorite things was my daughter could always come in the bathroom on me, but I didn't dare do that to her. Confidentiality. What are you going to do with that? Here you have a person that is not quite an adult, but still really not a child. And so they're coming to clinic, and they're having issues, and their parents may or may not be with them. So are you going to ask the parent to step out? Are you going to tell the parent what you all talked about? What are you going to do? I had an example of a teenager that came with one of my patients, and his concern was that he was masturbating, but nothing was coming out. And so he really wanted to go to somebody to have that checked out. A urologist, he had decided, would be a good place for him to go, but he didn't want me to tell his mother anything about it. And I said to him, who has the insurance on you? And he said, my mother, my parents do. And I said, so if I send you to the urologist, one, how are you going to get there? And two, how are you going to explain the bill that comes to your parents' house from a urologist? Won't they ask you questions about where that came from? So he decided not to tell his parents, not to do the referral with the urologist, but to just wait it out and see what happens. And so several months later, he showed back up in the clinic for something else and said, oh, by the way, I wanted you to know I'm fine with that thing that we talked about. So unless the health of the child or others is compromised, that is, there's a threat of suicide, violence, an eating disorder, or some kind of abuse, or they're having sex with somebody that's 3 or more years older than them. So if it's not a safety issue, and you do not have their permission to tell the parent, then probably if you want to continue to hear from them about their issues, you will not share that with the parent. Some parents, of course, refuse to step out of the room. I've had that happen. And so you really have to talk a lot with the parent about the child and what the age is and all of that. So confidentiality with an adolescent is a little bit of an issue, but if you stay with what the safety issues, then you can still tell safety issues to parents even without the adolescent's consent. Usually I try to talk them into letting me share with the parent because they have a right to know. Physical development, when you're looking at them in the clinic, you need to pay attention again, like always, to their height and their weight and their body mass index, and record their tenor stage. So orchidometer is what you're looking at on the screen. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know one of these things existed. It was introduced in 1966 by Swiss pediatrician endocrinologist Professor Prater of the University of Zurich. It consists of a string of 12 numbered wooden or plastic beads of increasing size from about 1 to 25 milliliters. Doctors sometimes informally refer to this as Prater's balls. The medical worry beads are the endocrine rosary. Every endocrinologist should have one. It's their stethoscope. So, I don't know. I guess you can order them online if you have little boys and you need to measure the size of things. But anyway, that'll work. Sometimes you might be able to palpate what's called a varicocele or enlarged vein, but it's not a problem unless the testicles are not the same size. And the gynecomastia is something else you might see, and they get worried about that, but remember it does for most of the children here by the time they reach full sexual development. You want to check for their thyroid gland, for scoliosis, because they're growing, so the scoliosis grows as the child grows. So if they're quickly growing, you need to make sure that you are checking them, their back, by bending over, letting them look, check for the hips, the shoulders, and are they happy with what they have and who they are. For cognitive development, when you have them, you need to ask them, how's school going? What do you want to do with your life when you graduate? What are you doing in school? You have some kind of activity? Because this is important, because we know when children drop out of school, then they can get into all kinds of trouble. And they're supposed to be in school. They're supposed to want to do well. Social and emotional development, you ask about school, like we talked about family, peers, safety, exposure to violence, abuse, weapons in the home or community, mental health issues, mood, depression, anger problems, thinking about suicide, sexuality, sexual activity. And during this age, you can ask them about sexual activity. They might say, well, I do it laying down. I mean, they're still sort of in concrete operations. They're moving to formal, but not totally. Their sexual orientation, a lot of people are hesitant to ask about that. You know, are you attracted to boys or girls or both or neither? Because there are asexual people that have no sexual appetite whatsoever. They're out there. Risk behaviors with alcohol, tobacco, prescription drugs, or eating disorders. And your book gives you a computer program that you can actually hand to these computer literate kids, and they will answer more on the computer than they might to you in person. But the whole deal about asking all of these things is that you yourself feel comfortable doing it. Because if you act like you're not comfortable, then they're not going to be comfortable answering your questions. Let's talk about the 11 to 14-year-old, which is probably the most difficult period in the adolescent phase of development, because nothing matches during this time. Their cognitive development might be ahead of their physical development, their emotional development might be behind their social development. Nothing is on even keel. Something is out of whack. Daydreaming occurs during this phase, and that's normal and not to be condemned necessarily, because they're thinking a lot about their goals. Because of their preoccupation with themselves, they may drop in their school performance, especially in junior high school. This is due to lack of motivation, more likely, than cognitive ability. They are anti-adult. They want to still spend time with their peers. They're embarrassed that they ever had parents. And so you'll see them out at the mall. They'll walk about 3 paces ahead of their parents, act like that they're not with them. They do challenge authority. They're argumentative and disobedient. This is the age of 13, which is probably the most difficult part. They have a lot of mood swings, a lot of door slamming. They don't want you in their room and practically cut off your finger and shut the door so you don't get in there. They do have some same-sex friendships, and this can even get into sexual experimentation. It's not unusual for guys, for example, to see in a group who can pee the furthest, or who can, masturbate and ejaculate the farthest. There's all those kinds of sexual experimentations during this time. And this is the time when clothes, of course, and appearance become extremely important. The middle adolescent period is not quite as tumultuous as the earlier part. They want to stand out. This is the age of the blue hair and the piercings and all of that. They're less concerned about how their body's changing, more concerned about what it looks like. And they're big into extracurricular activities like sports and cheerleading, flag groups, and all of those kind of things. They're beginning to be concerned with societal issues like poverty and peace and the environment. They have their own dress code. I think my daughter went through an emo phase where she dressed in black. Worried about her for a little while, but it did pass. The way that they talk is in their own language. They have words that used to mean one thing to their parents but mean different things to them, and they'll laugh at you if you say it, or act like you said some awful word and you don't know what their code for that word is. They need peer contact still. It's even more important for anybody that's handicapped or appears different to their group. This is when the 15 to 17-year-olds, they start dating, sexual experimentation, and for some people, sexual intercourse. So there's some risk-taking that begins to increase during the 15 and 17-year age group. And remember, they think they're infallible and nothing can hurt them. Late adolescence stretches from 18 to 21, where you are completely grown. You're capable of understanding the consequences of your actions and behaviors. And you no longer base judgment about human relationships on overt behavior that you see. Parents' role turns to one of support. They probably don't have the same value system as their parents, but it's more modified and it's leans eventually back to their parents' role and ideas. And years in college kind of put a moratorium and prolonged adolescence. So risk behaviors. Risk behavior continues to be a major cause of morbidity and mortality in this age group. And so they're going to explore and experiment and push the limits of their own personal experience. All you have to do is get on the interstate, watch some adolescent go down through there on his motorcycle. He's got, the back wheel is on the ground, but the front one may be up. He's going about 80 miles an hour, not wearing a helmet, and zigging in and out and going between cars down the middle line. So they think they're not going to get hurt. It can't happen to me mentality. It's true when you look at drugs, sex, school, peer pressure, all of that. They think they are untouchable during this period of time. And they are at their peak of physical, abilities, but that doesn't mean that they're not at risk. So what contributes to their risk-taking? Well, if they're not doing well in school, or they just plain don't have a cognitive function, or they have ADHD, which makes them impulsive, or they have role models that are deviant, or they don't have the support and encouragement they need, or they feel bad about themselves, they're hopeless or helpless, or they've been, victim of child abuse, they are suffering from depression, they can't breathe, they're poor, or they have insufficient, that should be sleep. So all of those things increase their risk-taking abilities. But what acts as protective forces to keep them from engaging in risk activities? Children with a high self-esteem that feel good about themselves are less likely to hurt themselves. Makes sense, doesn't it? You feel good about yourself, you're going to wear your seatbelt. You think you're a lousy bum, you may, and you think, I'm not worth anything, then you're not worth putting the seatbelt on. The other protective factor, they have a sense of the future. They're going somewhere, they're going to be something, and by being successful in school, that'll help them. Their parents are engaged still, they haven't run them off. Their parents are still engaged with them, interested in what they do, encourage them, and other adults that they have relationships care about them, like their grandparents, if they're around, or their aunts or uncles. These children are usually involved in like Habitat for Humanity, building a home, running the mile to raise money for something. And then they have recreation. They have things that they can do that are not exactly what you call risk-taking, but nonetheless provide some amount of excitement in their lives besides the danger of excitement. This talks about head technique. This is the things to, when you have an adolescent, to ask about. Ask about their home life, their school. Are they working? Some of them, of course, have part-time jobs. What about their meals? Pick up eating disorders. What kind of activities, drugs, sexuality, suicide, depression, and safety issues do they have? So you can just remember the HEADS acronym and learn what goes with it. And then when you see an adolescent, these are the things that you want to run through as you're talking to them to kind of judge, where some of the risks and problems might be. So what are the risk-taking behaviors? Well, the substance abuse, like tobacco use. Tobacco isn't as bad as other substances, perhaps, but it does lead to other substances. So if somebody smokes, you need to think about that may not be the only drug abuse for them, that might be a window to marijuana, heroin, crack, cocaine, whatever. They're not doing well in school. Why are they not doing well in school? If they're engaging in risky sexual activity, drinking and driving definitely is risk. Eating disorders, vomiting, taking laxatives that keeps your body image what you think it ought to be. So delinquency, involvement with gangs, that should be violence-related behavior, carrying weapons like knives in your pocket, mood disorders and mental disorders, all kinds, abuse, either you abusing somebody or they're abusing you, poor nutrition and physical activity are all risk-taking behaviors. So tobacco use. We talked about they're more likely to use marijuana, hard drugs, sell drugs, have multiple drugs, drop out of school, and experience early pregnancy and parenthood. So smoking is a clue to the possibility for a lot of higher risk behaviors. And then hookahs and electronic cigarettes are still risks for other drugs. They aren't as harmless as what people would want you to believe. Tobacco prevention strategies. Most young people think that a lot of people smoke, but actually 98% don't. And so they need to be told that. Tobacco products, if you've ever been around where anybody bought any or looked at the price, they're very expensive, and that's on purpose to keep people from smoking. There are smoke-free zones in schools, hospitals, a lot of public buildings now, thank goodness. You have to be inconvenienced to be able to smoke. Dental providers can help. You know, it stains your teeth, it gives you bad breath. You can encourage parents to talk to them, even if they smoke, to tell them, you know, not to smoke. And then insurance will sometimes have benefits for people that don't smoke. And there are public anti-smoking campaigns around. Traveling down to Knoxville, I go back from Lenore City to Johnson City every week, and there is a billboard about, you know, baby in utero, and that they don't need to smoke. My favorite is the one about the toddler, I think, in the back seat, you know, talking about what seat should they get. They don't need a smoking seat section. Self-interest behaviors are a way of relieving distress, anger, and stress to create a sense of calm. So if you see these things, then you know that they're struggling with some of the issues at the top of the screen. So a lot of times you'll see people come in, adolescents, that engage in physical pain because emotionally they're hurting so bad that the physical pain, if they're hurting themselves physically, then they're not hurting emotionally. So these adolescents might have attempted suicide, have an eating disorder where they're, you know, vomiting, have a history of abusive trauma or mood disorder. What they do is they cut, scrape, hit, burn, rip their skin, hair. They pull their hair out. They pick at scabs and swallow bleach, break their bones and bruise themselves. All of this is to keep from emotional pain. So they may not want to raise their sleeves for you to take their blood pressure. That might be a sign they're either using drugs or that they have burned themselves with cigarettes or cut themselves. A lot of times girls cut themselves on their thighs. So you might pay attention to cutting because I know one thing that leads to cutting is bullying. So you might ask about that. In social media, you know, our First Lady, Melania, that is her big campaign, is to reduce bullying on social media. That's her calling while she's in office with her husband. And it does occur on social media. And I just saw on the news some representative was given 21 months in jail for sexting with a high school student who he convinced to disrobe and touch herself. So that was just in the paper or on the screen today that I was reading. Depression and social withdrawal. Depressed adolescents are very worrisome, extremely worrisome, and should be taken very seriously if they're sad. And then there are signs of media addiction. You know, they won't get away from the television. And then meeting strangers through online profiles is also another problem for this age group. And they will, meet them at their house or out somewhere and go off with them, and then, they don't return. Sexual abuse, rape by multiple perpetrators, incest, sodomy, lewd or lascivious acts on a child younger than 14, fondling, touching genital areas, breast, inappropriate kissing, oral copulation, penetration of genital or anal openings by foreign objects, sexual exploitation activities like pornography. They broke up the child pornography ring not too long ago up here in Upper East Tennessee. And then prostitution for minors, sex trafficking. We are up here in Upper East Tennessee. We do have sex trafficking problems. Many of these children are children that have run away. So when you see their pictures on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they have been trafficked. By the time they have gone away from their homes, they are picked up and then abused. So that does happen in all areas, but it's bad up in this area as well. So what are some problem behaviors? Those are things that you notice that are clearly beyond the age of the development of the child. So they would be drawing graphic pictures of things they really shouldn't have any knowledge of. Sometimes they're forced or threatened, either their own life or their parents' life, family's life, if they tell. If they're inappropriately using body parts, or if they're different ages, like a 12-year-old quote-unquote doctor and a 4-year-old quote-unquote patient would be concerning. If the child has emotional reactions like anger and anxiety, and they're not doing the typical things that this age group would do, but they're more involved in things that are well beyond their years. So other indicators of problems with adolescents would be loss of bowel and bladder control, that they're regressing, not sleeping, overeating or not eating, change in school performance, sexualized behavior, that they're very sexual, oriented more so than you would expect, and then all of the psychosocial like depression problems or psychosomatic problems, that they've run away or had suicide attempts, that they're in prostitution, promiscuity, substance abuse, pregnancy. Those are all indications that things are not going well with this age group. So what do you have to rule out whenever you're dealing with these children and you think that there might be sexual problems? Well, there's a thing called straddle injury where a girl might fall on something and injure herself and bruise herself down there. It wouldn't be a sexual thing. It would be just an injury thing. If they acquire sexually transmitted infections, if you have herpes or you have trichomonas or chlamydia in a 3-year-old, you know that didn't get there without some amount of abuse. There's a thing called lichen sclerosus, which is looks white down at the bottom, and I tried to get a picture of that for you, but I couldn't find a good one. Pinworm infestation. Pinworms at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning will crawl out of the anus, and they can get dyslexic and crawl in the vagina instead and cause some amount of irritation. And then foreign bodies. You know, it wouldn't be totally unheard of for an adolescent to use some kind of foreign body for their own satisfaction and then get it stuck in a body part. Then there's non-transmitted bacteria. Now, what's your responsibility for if you see somebody in the clinic that you think might have been sexually abused? What are you supposed to do? Well, if there's no sane evaluator possible, then you as a provider should interview the child and parent separately. Be non-judgmental, use language that the child can understand, identify words that the child uses for areas. I know one little boy I had one time, he was always worried about his frog. That was his whole genitalia, that's what he called it. Have child report what happened in their own words and ask open-ended, not leading questions. And document what's said. Then you report the case to the local child abuse hotline, and you work with Children's Protective Services to get a thorough assessment of them. You can expect to spend anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes if you report abuse, because they go through a lot of questions with you, and you stay on the line for a long time. So just expect to spend time doing that. That what needs to happen is a complete physical exam. So they do forensic specimens and testing for sexually transmitted infections. Cultures are the gold standard for this, and then you need to assess for the risk of HIV. That you can do some urine tests on girls, but on boys, they really recommend that you do the urethra swab, and then a colposcopy exam by an expert's recommended, so if there's any tears or injuries in the vagina, the anus, then that could be photographed and used for evidence, and then refer the family and the child to crisis counseling and therapy. It's difficult if you have to do all of this yourself, but it might be if you're in a rural area that's what has to happen. Self-perception is a critical indicator of quality of life in these children. It reflects happiness, academic performance, relationships, creativity, healthy risk-taking, perseverance, resilience, and problem-solving. So a positive self-perception provides the confidence and energy to take on the world and achieve one's goals, withstand crisis, and focus outside of yourself. So you need to have, for an adolescent, a positive self-perspective. For self-esteem, there's all the elements of a self-esteem, that your ideal self and perceived self are fairly congruent. How you believe is related in yourself is related to self-efficacy, how well you think you can do something. Then there's an affective element to self-esteem, that you don't have the feelings that you have when you're considering the discrepancy between your two selves don't make you sad or depressed. And then you need to be assertive and resilient, decisive, and respectful of others to have elevated self-esteem. So self-perception is significant. I am loved. You need to feel loved and cared for and secure. Worthiness, I like and respect myself. It comes from understanding that you have a purpose in life Confidence comes from thinking that you're able to do things, you're in control, and you're optimistic. Resources for standards of care. When you're out there taking care of children, there are the Bright Futures Guide, which you have, the NAP Mental Health Guide, which is also good, you might want to get. Both focus on the prevention of psychosocial problems and early recognition of mental disorders. So, who and what influences how you feel about yourself? Well, certainly the media tells you what's quote-unquote normal. Your coping style influences how you feel about yourself, if you're able to cope with those things. How healthy you are. If you have poor health, that's going to influence your self-perception. What environment you live in. If you live in a place where nobody ever goes to school, then you may, feel like there's no hope that you won't be able to go either. What stage you're in, how much support you have with other people in your family, and then how you believe in religion influence your self-perception. So how, as a parent or a nurse practitioner, can you grow self-esteem? Well, you can negate a child's feelings, not acknowledge that they're telling you that they're feeling sad or worried. You can kind of, fluff it off and say it's not anything, don't worry about it. Or you can be very critical of them, dwelling on negatives rather than positives, using put-downs and derogatory labels. Oh, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you'll never amount to anything. Typecasting or stereotyping, you're just like your father, he was a loser, or you're just like your age group, you're just like your population, that you're coming from, expecting too much. I can't believe you didn't make 100, you made 99.5. Tying children's character or personal worth to their performance or behavior. So if you expect a child to make straight A's, then their thought of themselves is totally tied sometimes to their grades. So when they don't do well in that one area that you're bragging on, then they really are crushed and feel really bad about themselves. So how do you know that you're feeling bad? Well, you end up quitting early, avoiding, not even trying, cheating, clowning around, acting silly to minimize feelings of failure, controlling, telling others what, bullying, putting others down, denying, minimize the importance of the task. Oh, I could have done that, but I didn't want to. It wasn't worth the effort. Rationalizing and making excuses, like blaming the teacher for failing a course. So when people do these things, you automatically know where they're coming from. So if people are bullying you, then you know that they have low self-esteem, or they wouldn't be doing that. Or if they're trying to control you, it's all a problem with their self-esteem. So these are really good clues to a person, to a window, to try to figure out where a person's self-esteem is. And self-esteem is so important. I've often said teachers only have 2 jobs in their whole life. They only have 2 jobs. One is to establish, increase, help, promote self-esteem in their students, and then instill in them a need for continual learning. That's the only 2 jobs that teachers really have, because the information changes year to year. It doesn't always stay the same. But what stays the same is if the students feel good about themselves, feel like that they can accomplish, and if they want to learn, if they've instilled that in them, then they've done their job. And that's pretty close from what other things added parents should do. So what this module kind of does is to help give you some tools that you can help parents to got their adolescents a little bit better so that their self-esteem's not crushed whenever they come out as adults. That ends the presentation. You guys have any questions for me about this or about anything else? Anybody?
What are the dates for our test going to be? Didn't see it on the calendar.
September 29th, the test will open. And it closes either the 1st or 2nd. I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. But it opens September the 29th. So you have several days that you can take it, 24 hours around the clock. And you will have plenty of time to take your test. So don't worry that it's going to cut off before you get done. If you do run into any issues with your computer or the internet, you have my phone number. So what you should do is call me immediately. I don't care when it is, call me so that I know what happened to you and I can work with it. Okay? So any problems online, please call me during test time, because I need to know that immediately so that we can figure out what route to take from there. Hopefully you won't have any, but I know how computers are and the internet, depending on where you live, they can be problematic. So I just ask, don't call me 2 days later and say, oh, by the way, I didn't finish my test 2 days ago because the computer died on me. I don't want to know that then, because then I won't know what to do. But do call me immediately thereafter if you have a problem. Anything else for the good of the order? Are you still navigating the course okay and all that?
Yes.
Good. I'm still staying 1 week ahead of you, so as long as that continues, we'll be fine. Anything else, you guys? Well, good luck on your test. It'll be over those topics that are in your PowerPoint. And you just need to, what I was talking about with Randy when I came on board, was dividing it up and taking, X number each day so that you're not so overwhelmed and you'll have time to study it all. Okay? Y'all good? Anything else, you guys, before we sign off? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to bid you adieu. Good night, you guys, and good luck on your test.
Good night. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Huh?
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Good night, guys.